You know, every single bank on the planet, and I mean every bank, from the tiny credit union down the street to the massive global players, is wrestling with the exact same multi-trillion-dollar problem. Their core technology, the very heart of the bank, is getting old, and the pressure to modernize is, well, it's absolutely immense.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How do you upgrade an entire bank without, breaking it? It sounds simple, but for a bank, it's like asking someone to change the engines on a jumbo jet while it's in mid-flight cruising at 30,000 feet. It is an incredibly high-stakes operation where even the tiniest mistake could be catastrophic.
Okay, so just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about here, take a look at this chart from Gartner. It shows this absolute explosion of new demands on banks, and this is just from one new technology, generative AI. We're not talking about adding one or two little features. We are talking about dozens of super complex new jobs for the bank, everything from preventing fraud to creating AI financial coaches. The pressure to innovate is just coming from every direction, all at once.
And all of this intense pressure, it's basically pushed banks into a corner. It's created what we're calling the banker's modernization dilemma. And this dilemma, it forces them to pick between two, frankly, pretty terrible choices. On one side, you've got the legacy giants. Think Oracle, Temenos. They're safe, they're stable, they've been around forever. But their technology is often monolithic. It's like one giant tangled block of code built decades ago that's just incredibly slow and expensive to change. Then on the other side, you've got these exciting new fintech startups. They're fast, they're agile, they were born in the cloud. But are you really going to bet your entire multi-billion-dollar bank on a company that hasn't really proven it can handle that kind of scale? It is the classic rock-and-a-hard-place scenario.
What if there was a third option? What if you didn't have to choose between being safe and being fast? This is where a company called Bankware Global comes into the picture. They offer a unique third way out of this mess, a strategy they call pragmatic modernization.
So what in the world is a pragmatic modernizer? Well, the core idea is actually pretty simple, but it's really powerful. It's about creating the best of both worlds. Imagine you could take the proven, battle-tested horsepower that can run a bank the size of ICBC, one of the biggest in the world, and combine that with the nimble, flexible, cloud-native design of a startup. That's the whole idea right there.
So how do they actually pull this off? Well, the secret is all in the architecture. First, they use something called microservices. So instead of that one giant block of code, think of the bank's functions, deposits, loans, you name it, as individual Lego bricks. If you need to update your mortgage service, you just swap out that one little brick. You don't have to risk the whole castle falling down. And second, it's cloud native. This just means it's built from day one to work perfectly with the cloud. So you get all that efficiency, and you only pay for the computer power you actually use.
And here's where all that techie stuff translates into real business value. We're talking about a drastically faster time to market for new products because you're just swapping out those little Legos. You get fault isolation, which means if one little service has a bug, it doesn't bring down the entire bank. A much, much lower total cost of ownership. And maybe most importantly, it future-proofs the banks so they're not locked into one vendor's tech forever.
Okay, so that's the theory, that's the architecture. Now let's get to the good stuff and see how this foundation actually gets turned into real products that are changing how banks work, like right now. Just look at this number. 1 day. That's how long it can take to launch a basic new financial product using Bankware Global's platform. Now, to put that into perspective, in the old world, this process would typically take months, sometimes longer. This one number, it's an absolute game changer.
So how is that even possible? Well, it's thanks to a product they call the BXPF, or Product Factory. The genius of it is that it separates all the business rules, things like interest rates, fees, who's eligible, from the main computer code. This means the bank's business teams, the marketing people, they can actually build and launch new products themselves without writing a single line of code or waiting for months for the IT department to get to it.
Now that product factory works together with their main platform, the BXCBP, or a core banking package. Remember that whole changing the engine mid-flight problem? Well, this is the solution. Its modular plug-and-play architecture lets banks modernize piece by piece. They can start small, maybe just with their loan system, then do deposits later. It lets them avoid that terrifyingly risky big bang approach where you have to switch everything over at once.
All right, let's circle back to that AI revolution we talked about. This isn't some science fiction idea anymore. It is happening right now. A staggering 80% of senior banking executives are already planning or actively implementing generative AI. And look closely, the number one thing they're investing in? Code generation and conversion. This is super important. And guess who's right at the front of this wave? Bankware Global. They recently teamed up with one of Korea's biggest banks, Wooribank, to build the financial industry's very first generative AI development platform. And they were right to call it a major milestone, because it really, really is.
This whole partnership is built around their third key product, BXCA, the code assistant. You can think of this as the AI catalyst. It's a tool that automates the single hardest, most expensive, and riskiest part of modernizing a bank, converting that decades-old legacy code, stuff like COBOL, which barely anyone knows how to program anymore, into modern computer languages. It basically takes a nearly impossible task and makes it possible.
So you've got this unique arsenal of products, right? A modular core, a super fast product factory, an AI code converter. So how does Bankware Global actually win in this hyper-competitive market? Well, they use this really clever two-front strategy.
Let's break this down. At home in Korea, they're usually up against these giant consulting firms that just build custom one-off projects. So there, Bankware changes the whole conversation. They say, don't just buy a project, adopt a world-class platform. It's lower risk, lower cost. But when they go global, they're fighting the big established product companies like Oracle. And here, they win by being that pragmatic modernizer we talked about, offering the best of both worlds, with a ton of experience in Asia's super dynamic markets.
And you know what? This strategy is clearly working. The proof is right here in their client list. We're talking about over 100 institutions trusting this tech. You've got pure digital innovators like K-Bank, huge established leaders like Shinhan Bank, and even global titans like ICBC. So this isn't just a theory, it's a proven platform running at massive scale.
Okay, so let's zoom out and bring this all together. What does this huge shift in technology really mean for the future of banking itself? At the end of the day, the technology we've been looking at isn't just a simple system upgrade. No, it's the foundation for what's coming next. A future where banking is hyper-personalized, driven by AI, and so seamlessly embedded into other apps and services that you barely even notice it's there. That's the whole idea behind banking as a service. Which leaves us with one final kind of provocative thought. In the past, banks were built like these giant monolithic fortresses. But looking ahead, with this new kind of flexible Lego-like technology, maybe the future of banking isn't built at all. Maybe it's composed.